I like to say I am from bread. Kind of strange, I know. I am from the smell of freshly baked ciabatta, the touch of a lost hairnet in the back of the dryer, the image of flour stains on old work boots. Bread floods all of the senses of my childhood memories. I am from bread because the Pasquesi family is one of 3 founding families of a bread company in Chicago founded in 1886, a company still in existence today. But bread is so much more than rising yeast to my family. Bread nurtures the soul. It communicates trust, welcome, and comfort. Bread has the power to renew old relationships and forge new ones. My dad, Alan Pasquesi, lived these ideals on a daily basis on the bakery floor and as a father to 4 children. In fact, I lovingly recall the time when my dad went door to door delivering bagels to every single student on my college dorm room floor. He'd knock, hold out a sleeve of bagels, and exclaim, "Yeah, these are from Kira down the hall in room 102. Of course, 18-year-old Kira was positively mortified when she realized what was happening. He was practically bribing people with carbs to be my friends. However, I now see that my dad wanted to make sure his then very shy daughter was well taken care of in college. Bread was how my dad made sense of the world. It was a way for him to be seen, a way for him to be heard in his very unassuming way. It was a way for him to show up as a father, as a caregiver. Bread is not only an important part of my family history, but also a symbol of what I value as a teacher. Today, I'm grateful to call myself a leadership educator in the School of Education and CU Engage, the Center for Community-Based Learning and Research. In my classes, I support students in unlearning their assumptions about leadership so they can more authentically see themselves as leaders. I seek to create learning environments for students to find their voice, to practice being in community with one another. And from this perspective, learning is a process of humanizing leadership as an inherently values-based endeavor. In the Introduction to Leadership class, we do an exercise called Hear Me, adapted from my mentor, Dr. Sherry Watt, at the University of Iowa. During this activity, students sit in a circle and share what they value about who they are as a leader. They share what motivates them to lead, what motivates them based on who they are and where they are from. One by one, students go around the circle telling their leadership stories, particularly the stories that often go untold. I've heard stories of failure, untold stories of loneliness, stories of fear. We accept and affirm each other's experiences as vital to leadership. In this trusting circle, we bear witness with each other as we see each other's insecurities and hear each other more deeply. This is an uncomfortable yet revealing activity, one that students say helps them understand leadership in very new and different ways. The activity begins to help students deconstruct notions of leaders as all-knowing beings, immune from adversity and missteps. Facilitating Hear Me has become a deeply moving experience for me as an educator and as a human being. So much so, I began to pride myself as someone who lived the same vulnerability that I thought I was teaching at CU Boulder. All this to say, so I thought. This brings me to a moment in my capstone class when a student approached me at the end of the semester. The student shared her appreciation for the class and, of course, asked for a letter of recommendation. It was a pretty typical end-of-semester interaction with a graduating senior. After a hug, some more pleasantries, she leaned in and quietly asked, "Are you okay?" Taken aback, I smiled a little bit too big and said, "Sure, why?" She explained, "I don't know. It just seems like you're having a hard time lately. and I wanted to check in. I assured her I was fine, but when I got home, her words were ringing in my ears. Are you okay? Are you okay? I realized I was not in any way okay. In fact, I was resoundingly not okay. And in that moment, I broke. I couldn't hold it in. I couldn't hold in the sadness of my husband asking for a divorce, the stress of my long overdue dissertation, the shame of living in the silence of depression. I couldn't hold in the grief of slowly losing my father to a decade-long battle with early onset dementia, a disease that first robbed him of his ability to communicate, to share his stories, to be heard, a disease that took his life last November. I couldn't remain in the shadow of my performance any longer. Here I was teaching about authentic leadership, teaching about vulnerability, all while living a very, very different truth on the inside. I felt like a fraud with my students. So this year forced me to prioritize my mental and emotional well-being in some very real and painful ways. It forced me to acknowledge my untold story, ugly parts and all. I had to move beyond intellectualizing, beyond performing vulnerability, to actually feeling it deep within inside of me, even if it meant letting things fall apart. And believe me, they fell apart. This year also prompted difficult questions about who I want to be as an educator. As teachers, we think about humanizing educational spaces for students. But how do we also humanize education for educators? What's the line we walk as teachers in revealing our own truths in the classroom? What purpose does vulnerability serve in the teaching and learning process, and for whom? How much can and should we truly be known by our students? I'm cautious here not to romanticize vulnerability as this unequivocal good, although I know I've done so in some ways already. I think about the unequal risks and consequences of showing up as more fully human in the classroom based on race, gender, sexual orientation, ability, and otherwise. I think about the power my privileged identities afford me in claiming authenticity in environments that were created to validate my personhood. And I'm concerned. I'm concerned about any potential burden of my white fragility in these moments on students of color, especially in courses grappling with the lived realities of privilege and oppression in leadership. I don't know what this all means for me as an educator. I do know I want to be the kind of teacher who recognizes the humanity in all students as they find their way as leaders in life. I want to normalize telling our untold stories of leadership, to expand the humanness of leaders. I want to call for more courageous, creative, compassionate, and generous ways of leading, ways of being with one another in community. There are no easy answers to all of these wonderings, but it's critical that we engage collectively with big questions and navigate these tensions and more. Looking back at my interaction with the student last semester, I'm grateful to have a student that would ask if I'm okay. It speaks to the relationships that we developed in the course together. Even more so, it makes me hopeful for the future of leadership in our increasingly uncertain and complex world. Now, when a student asks me if I'm okay, my response is, I'm struggling well. Or sometimes, I'm struggling better. It's a small way for me to claim my humanity in that time and space, a way to have grace with myself just as I do with other people. How will you claim your humanity as an educator? Remember, it can be just as simple as breaking bread with colleagues or students, just as my dad did with his legacy. And perhaps, instead of asking each other, where are you from? we should ask, what are you from? Because I am from bread. What about you? Together, let's humanize education, not just for students, but for us as educators. Thank you.